G'day, it's Adam, VK4GHZ. Today we're going to take a look at my latest Nextion firmware release for the K3NG Rotator Controller project. Today being the 23rd of March 2021. We've got a page and a half of notes to go through. There's two new pages, there's new buttons, there's a few fixes in the background, lots to discuss. Stick around, that's coming up. Before we go anywhere, let's just take a look at the About page and you'll see what code versions we're dealing with. Arduino code version 21-03-20, that's 3 days ago. Goody released an update. And this Nextion screen is 21-03-23, today's date, 23rd of March. All right, so here in the shack I've got a Yaesu G5500, I've got a 5-inch Nextion and a 3.5-inch Nextion hooked up to the G5500 controller. And in this box here, I've got a 5-inch Nextion with one of my universal K3NG type rotator controllers. This one still has the old Nextion, or the previous version of Nextion firmware on it. And that'll be handy just to show you a few little bugs I found, actually. Alrighty. All right, not a big deal, but when you're on the main gauges page and you went to set up a preset, enter the azimuth bearing, the name for it, press return, it would take you back to the main numerals page. Likewise, if you're on the moon and sun tracking page, you went to your presets, doesn't matter which one you pressed, edited a preset, returned, it took you back to the main numerals page, so that was wrong. So that's been fixed on the latest release. I've got a 5-inch Nextion and a 3.5-inch Nextion hooked up simultaneously to my G5500 controller. Only the 5-inch Nextion is talking to the controller board. I'll have to transmit data line off the 3.5, otherwise you'd have a conflict there. I've set the colours up the same on both of these, just so we're doing an apples for apples comparison. Now the first change, you now have a big gauges page, and you'll find on the 5-inch there's an expand button here, just tap that. We have bigger gauges. On the 3.5-inch, where room is really tight, it's a long press of the stop button. Now on the 5-inch, we have touch points every 15 degrees. So for instance, at 0 degrees, see it's going to 0. We also have a touch point at 15, 30, I'll just stop that, 45, 60, 75, and so on. Now we can do that on the 5-inch, no problem, because there's plenty of room. The 3.5-inch, it's a bit tight for space for getting hotspots in there. So we still have, no, this is not talking to the controller, but there are hotspots every 30 degrees for that. Back on the 5-inch, we also have 15-degree hotspots for elevation. So I'll just send that to 0. Okay, that's back at 0, and there's a hotspot at 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, and so on. So this page is intended for just manual operation. There's just absolutely no room on there for any tracking icons or your GPS data or anything else. So it's pretty much an electronic version of the Yaesu G5500 controller. Let's take a look at the 5-inch Nextion HMI in the Nextion editor. Okay, this is the main gauges page. You can see that I've got hotspots every 30 degrees around the azimuth compass and every 30 degrees on the elevation compass. And that's just reminded me another change. Now, the minor marks on the gauges, how could I forget that? The minor marks on the gauges are every 5 degrees. This makes it a little bit more human user-friendly. So you've got 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 15, 20, 25, 30. All right. Previously, they were every 6 degrees. Now the reason for that is, originally I used a clock face as a template for the Photoshop image. So every 6 degrees, you know, it's like five steps in here every minute. You know, you got 25 minutes, 30, 35, and so on. So if you're wondering why that was, that's why I used a clock face originally as the template. So now I've used a proper compass rose as a template to generate these graphics, and we now have a much more user-friendly 5 and 10 degree increments around the gauges. We've got our 30 degree tap points. Now if we look at the big gauges page, you can see because you're working with, because you've got more space to work with, you can squeeze in more hotspots here. Now these hotspots can't actually overlap, because I mean, if you wouldn't know what to do. Do you want me to go there, or do you want me to go here? Because we've got bigger gauges, I've managed to squeeze in 15 degree hotspot points like that. Likewise on the elevation gauge, we've got 15 degree points over here. Righto, let's take a look at the 3.5 inch HMI in the Nextion editor. Now because we don't have as much room to work with around these gauges, this is the big gauges page on the 3.5, we've got hotspots every 30 degrees. So that's still useful if you want to just sweep your antenna, but there just isn't room for the 15 degree touch points. Now on the main gauges page for the 3.5 inch, there's just no touch points at all. So if you want that functionality, just go to your big gauges page. When you're doing an elevation operation, you'll see the status line come up. Now that's quite normal for that to flash like that. It's not ideal, but the way these Nextion gauges work, the Nextion gauge is square. So the elevation gauge is actually the same size as the azimuth gauge. So the elevation gauge comes down to here. It's not obvious, but we're just not using that part of the gauge. So what I've done, there's a return button there, which is actually a part of the background image. And those overlays that come up, the VSS1 and VSS2 statage overlays, they actually flash, because what's happening, you've got one component here, which is the gauge, which is updating, and you've got the other component here, which is the status messages, which are also updating. So you've got two components that are trying to update over the top of each other, and that results in the flashing. So that's a bit of a limitation of these Nextion displays, without spending big dollars and going to the Intelligent series displays. So that's the big gauges page. Just to return back to your normal gauges pages, just press the return button. Another update is that you can change the colours from the gauges page. Now, originally you had to be on the main numerals page to set the colour of the azimuth and the font, elevation. But now you can also do that from the elevation page. So just touch the word EL and you've got access to the same menu, colour menu. Isn't that disgusting? Yellow on dark magenta. Touch the azimuth text and you can set that to whatever you like. Now you can't change the font on a number of these pages. Room is pretty tight. You can certainly change the font on the main numerals page. You've got room to do that. Let's go to an LCD look, shall we? Good old low green LCD, like so. But if you go to all these other pages, it's just going to be a standard built-in font. It gets really tricky when you've got decimal points. You know, it just gets awkward. So it ignores the font information on that. But you can, what did I have there? Forget. Let's get that to something half decent. Yeah, but on this page you can at least set the colours. Not only that, you can also set the colours of the needles. So the elevation needle, it's a long press. You go to a colour selector, red, long press of azimuth, and you can change your colour like that. Now a short press on either of those will allow you to enter a bearing in, say 23 for elevation, off it goes. azimuth, 60, off it goes. So that's a long press of the aim for the middle of the gauge here if you want to set the colours. Also new in this version is that you can set the colours of your preset tags from this page as well. Previously you could only do that from the main numerals page, but you can now do that on the, this is with a 5-inch, you can now do that on the elevation page as well. So simply touch your preset name, anyone, doesn't matter, and you can change the colours. Alright, on the main gauges page you can also set the status message colour. Now the status message, now the easiest way to get that up is just send it off somewhere clockwise. Status message will come up, touch that, and we can change it to a colour and font that we prefer. Like so. You can only do that when the status message is actually up, and touch it. Alright, moving along. We have our moon and sun tracking pages. They're pretty much the same. Satellite tracking page, hasn't really changed. Configuration screen. This is where it looks very different. So in the old version, what we had was some radio toggle buttons, like that. But as we add more and more things, we just don't have the room to use the radio buttons anymore. So what I've done, I've created buttons here which with built-in LEDs, which tell you when they're active or selected. So if you want to look at the other pages that you don't normally want to look at, such as the rotor calibration, just simply select it. There is a new page here, we'll come to this. That's the tracking settings page, the diagnostics page, and the user-defined functions page. So if you want to see those pages, just simply enable them like that. And as you step through the navigation, you'll be able to see them. There's our rotor calibration page, our tracking settings page, we'll come to that in a second. Our diagnostics page and our user-defined functions page. Normally you don't want to see those once you've set your system up, but they're easily accessible. Now, our start screen. You can either select numerals, small gauges, and of course now we have the new option of the big gauges, so just select whichever one you prefer. I'm going to do numerals over here, and I'm going to do big gauges there. So when we turn the system off and turn it back on again, they'll power up how you wanted them. Reverse elevation, that behaves as it did previously. It's just the different button. So that will flip the elevation gauge on your main gauges page, and of course the big gauges page, like that. This is new, keypad keep value. What the hell does that mean? Well, what happened was that when you went to use the keypad to type in a value, it always started with a blank. Now, sometimes that was good because you just key in exactly what you want, 23. There you go, my DIN2 level is now 23. But with keypad keep value on, what it does, it will take that value to your keypad like so. So it keeps the value there. So perhaps, you know, you're about to enter something in, maybe you got distracted, the phone rang or something's going on, you come back to it, oh, what was I doing? What was I about to enter in? You can see what you're about to change. It just simply requires, let me do that here. It just means you need to use the backspace clear key to change it. So say we had 23 there, I want to make that 28, enter. Likewise with anything requiring an alphanumeric entry on the ABC keyboard, like a preset, let's do that here. Say I want to change preset 1, its name. So from VK4GHZ, I'm going to edit that. Let's make that something else. See, it's kept the value, 130. I've got my diagnostics on. So I want to make that 135 degrees, and I want to change that name. This is where I have to see how it's taken the name to the keyboard, and it need to use the backspace to change that VK4GHZ. Now, without you keep value. We'll just go back and do that again. As you can see, it's blank. Oh, Jesus, what was that value? 130. And this is where you need to type the full name in again, VK4GHZ. All right, just going to turn the diagnostics off. All right, let's go on to the rotor calibration page. Used to be called config 2 if you look at the HMI. Now we've got the new style buttons for manual calibration over here. But firstly, the behavior of these end stop calibration buttons has changed. So what used to happen is you'd preset either, say you want to do a full counterclockwise, see how the button highlights and it goes out, then it was a long press of set for it to send the backslash command. The behavior on the new version has changed. So you would touch full CCW, it will stay highlighted, so it's a constant reminder as to what you just touched, and that won't extinguish until you do the long press of set, like so. And I've just set that. Oops. Anyway, so that won't go out until you do the long press of the set. Over here so once you've, I'm going to have to, I didn't mean to do that. All right, I'm just got to, time out, just got to reset my counterclock position. All right, full counterclock, touch the button, long press of set. Now it's back to 0, that's where it should be. Okay, easily fixed. So if you've set your end stops, you've full counterclockwise, full clockwise set, full up set, full down set. And for some reason, when you go to physically mount your antennas or, I don't know, something's out, you can introduce an offset. So for instance, say we were out by 10 degrees on our azimuth. We would select azimuth, enter in 10, enter, and it would be a long press of manually calibrate. No, I'll do that now. Manually calibrate, and you'll see that now things were at 10 degrees. I'm just going to change that back again. 0, manually calibrate. Likewise for elevation. If you want to introduce an offset into your elevation reading, touch elevation, key in the value, 3, enter, then it's a long press of manually calibrate. I'm not going to do that now. All right, new page, tracking settings. What this does, this offers some partial support to the new feature that Goody introduced recently, where you can define your tracking parameters. What we can do here, we can change our check intervals for both the moon, sun, and satellite tracking. Now, what you see on the screen is dependent to what features you've set. So if you haven't set the sun or satellite tracking, you won't see these. So the screen is always responsive to the Arduino features that you've set up. Now I noticed in Goody's code the defaults were 5,000 milliseconds. On the screens here, we enter in seconds, not milliseconds, just to make it a little bit more human friendly. So what the screen is doing, it'll multiply the value you type in by 1,000 and it sends that to the Arduino. Well, the moon doesn't move real quick, so why don't, instead of checking that every 5 seconds, why don't we check that every 60 seconds? 60, enter. Now that will take a long press of the set button here. And if we look in our status message area, it's a long press, sending \TM 60,000. So it's multiplied that value by 1,000. Check the sun check interval. Well, sun doesn't move real quick either, so we'll make that 60 seconds. Long press of that, TU 60,000. Satellites, they can move pretty quickly. Why don't we change that to 10 seconds though? Long press of that button, \TS 10,000. Now, because the Arduino doesn't send the current values to the Nextion, what will happen, I'm just going to turn this off, we'll turn it back on again. That's going to go into basic cheeseburger mode, which is a good thing. What happens then is that because the screen doesn't know what value it's actually set to, it's just going to default to 5 on the display. That doesn't actually change the values you've actually set. Maybe in the future we can get the Arduino to send those values when there was a backslash, I think it was a backslash left bracket command that sent the values. So perhaps in the future we can get these check intervals at least sent to the Nextion. I only included these because I figured these are the ones you'd want to change, if at all. The other ones you probably wouldn't want to change once you've configured it. Now, just while we're in the basic cheeseburger mode on this display, I quite often get calls from people who say, I've programmed a Nextion, but I'm not seeing all the features that I should be seeing. Where's the elevation and the satellite tracking and all that sort of stuff? The thing is, your Nextion has to power up at exactly the same time as your controller, because there's a bit of handshaking that goes on. The controller will send to the Nextion display, these are my system settings, and the Nextion display will respond to that. Now, if you've set elevation and say moon tracking and other things, and you're not seeing them, just come to the About page, click the button here, Help Cheeseburger Only, and here we can see a description of what the issue is. I'm expecting to see more features. To see all the features you have set, this Nextion must be connected to the MCU and power up exactly the same time as the MCU, ideally off the same 5-volt rail as the MCU. And this is because the MCU sends information to the Nextion at power up and timing is tight to keep things moving along. There's also been lots of other background changes, renaming of variables, which the end user doesn't see or probably even care about, but I've attempted to do a little bit of a cleaning up for a bit more consistency across the coding. There's been endless pixel tweaking, you move something a couple of pixels here and there just to make it try and look prettier. So lots of changes. I hope it's a little bit more user-friendly and you like it. Downloads are from my website, VK4GHZ.com. Click on the downloads link at the top, then click on the obvious, the Nextion project. Scroll down and you'll find the zip packages for both the 5-inch and 3.5-inch there for download. But totally recommend the 5-inch if your enclosure can accommodate a bigger screen. I mean, the 5-inch is just wonderful. All right, that's it for now. I hope you found the video useful. There's lots of little subtleties in a project like this. I plan to produce a PDF document just as a summary as to all the little things here and there, the things that require a short touch versus a long touch. There's quite a few of those. I mean, space is just really limited, so you have to make the most of what screen space you do. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and like and subscribe and ring the bloody bell, all that sort of stuff. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.